Getting the right amount of protein in is so important for many different aspects of health. Everything from blood sugar stability to weight loss, energy, focus. I can go on and on again about how important it is to get the right number of protein grams in. It feels really hard though, right? A lot of times as I'm seeing patients or even as I'm thinking about myself, if you use that formula of trying to get about 0.8 to a gram of protein per pound of body weight, that's a lot of protein. And I actually have some issues with that number too. I don't think it's necessarily right for everybody. But here's what we can agree on, that overall, most people need about 20 to 30 grams of protein every 4 hours. Now, if you're heavy lifting, you're doing a lot of weight lifting, you're super active, you're trying to put a ton of muscle on, then yes, that number does need to go up from maybe 70 grams to 80, 90, 100, or even for men, up to 120, even 150. So getting those protein grams in is tricky. And, for all of you out there that might be plant-based, beans and lentils and vegetables don't really give you a lot of protein ounce for ounce. It feels like you have to eat a lot of food to get those protein grams up, especially when you're plant-based. And for those of you who aren't plant-based, you're willing to eat meat. Who wants to eat a ton of meat? I don't know if you've tried that before, but for me, it just feels heavy and like something's sitting in my belly. So how do we solve the protein conundrum, right? How do we get these numbers up? For this reason, right? For the simple reason that we're busy, we're running around, we need the protein, especially in the face of hormone shifts, especially as we go into perimenopause and menopause, and definitely if you're trying to lose weight and belly weight. My go-to is a protein smoothie. I honestly can't live without it, I'm embarrassed to say. I talk a lot about the importance of protein and overall health in this video. Make sure you check it out if you want to dive deeper into the concept of protein in general. But for us today, here's what I'd like to do. I want to show you some of the traps that I myself, knowing everything I do, have fallen into when I'm trying to pick the right protein powder, and how there are differences in protein powders, and how trying to get that front loading of 20 to 30, even up to 40 grams of protein in the morning is possible, but you have to have the right products to use to be able to get there. Okay, I've got about 4 or 5 different products out here, and they are similar in that they are all sort of labeled, packaged, presented as protein powders, right? Now I know some taste better than others. I know that you're gonna have personal preferences, but we wanna get into understanding the ingredients in protein powders and how they might work for you or against you. Let's start over here. I have this particular brand and this one, both of which I like, and I actually like the taste. But really what we want to do is turn it around and understand what the label is trying to tell us. So first, always pay attention to serving size. 1 scoop of this particular protein powder provides about 20 grams of protein. Now that is ideal. I feel like that's a really good number. Some of these products, for example, if you take this one in particular, 1 scoop only gives you 6 grams of protein. So you think you're using a protein powder, but if you're only doing a scoop or maybe 2 scoops and you're using this particular product, you're not necessarily getting those protein grams to where they want to be. The next thing we need to look at is the type of protein. So this has pea protein in it, which is actually an intermediate to slow metabolizing protein, meaning it's going to last with you for a longer period of time. That's great if you are running out the door and trying to stay full for maybe 4 or 5 hours, and definitely helping to curb sort of hunger cues that might be coming up randomly throughout the day. So great, I love using a pea protein. It's kind of my go-to because I know it has that intermediate ability of being metabolized, which is different from a whey protein, which is actually metabolized very quickly. So for people that are weight training or doing a lot of heavy weightlifting, they actually like a fast metabolizing protein because it seems to help build muscle a little bit more rapidly. Now the problem with the whey protein is that a lot of us can't digest it. We can't break it down. We get a lot of bloating or gas, or even some of the symptoms of a dairy intolerance, which includes rashes like eczema or psoriasis, a lot of dry or itchy skin, even acne for some. So if you're using a whey protein but having a lot of these different symptoms, whether you're breaking out or having bloating or indigestion, while I love whey for quick muscle building, because I know how many people don't tolerate it, you may want to switch over to a pea protein powder, which also helps with getting those protein grams up and does help with muscle building, but a little bit more gradually, not as aggressively. Now, switching gears a little bit, this particular powder actually has hemp protein. Now, hemp is actually one of the slowest metabolizing protein powders, right? So if you're doing a lot of heavy lifting, you may not feel good on a solely hemp protein powder. You want something more intermediate like a pea, and some of the rice proteins are a little bit more intermediate as well. So serving size, type of protein, those are the first two things to like zero in on. The next thing we need to look at after understanding serving size and the type of protein is the protein to carbohydrate ratio. Now let's take a look at these two, which I actually really like. In this particular product, it's very clear that for the 20 grams of protein, there's 5 grams of carbohydrate broken out as 2 grams of fiber and 2 grams of sugar. Now, this is another product I really like, but here we've got 9 grams of carbohydrate, and it doesn't really tell me how much sugar is in here. So I'm not 100% sure, but it does have 20 grams of protein. The fiber, though, it does have more fiber. It has about 4 grams of fiber in it. So again, if you are able to tolerate a slightly higher carbohydrate load, then you can do a product like this. But if you're somebody who knows you have very poor carbohydrate tolerance, then between these two really great products, this would be the better pick for you. So that's some of how you start to look at these labels and make these decisions. Now let's come back over here and look at the same information. So in this particular product, for 2 scoops, I only get 12 grams of protein. Not a lot of protein, right? Because 2 scoops over here is 40 grams. Big difference. Next, let's look at the carbohydrate load. For 2 scoops, I get 16 grams of carbohydrates. So for one, it's about 8. And then per scoop, I get about 1.5 to 3 grams, according to this, of sugar. So the issue with this particular powder is just the higher carbohydrate load in relationship to the amount of protein, right? So again, if you're carbohydrate sensitive, if you are sugar sensitive, this would not be a good product for you. However, if you're protein intolerant, like too much protein hurts your stomach, then this might be a good product for you. All right, so that's how we start to personalize this information around different types of protein powders. Let's do another one. Hopefully you guys are hanging with me as we're doing this. All right, here we've got 1 scoop. Oh, see, this is what I'm talking about. 2 scoops of protein gives you the 21 grams. Here it was 1, right? So these are areas where we flub up a little bit. Again, 2 scoops gives you 16 grams of carbohydrates. This particular product has a very heavy carbohydrate load, almost more so than this one when we're looking at the protein to carb ratio. Okay, so as you can see from this particular product, you've got 21 grams of protein with 16 grams of carbohydrate. That's like almost a 1-to-1 or 1 to what, 0.2 ratio of protein to carbohydrates. Ideally, we want to be at about a 1.8 to 1, closer to 2 to 1 ratio of protein to carbohydrates when you're taking these powders in. Okay, so just making sure everyone is still with me here, because it's a lot of number crunching, which is not always fun, but so important when we're really trying to optimize and keep blood sugar and belly fat and all these different things right where we need to be. You're looking at serving size. We're looking at the type of protein. Is it a fast, intermediate, or slow protein? We're looking at, do you tolerate a particular protein or not, right? So whey versus pea versus hemp. Are you having a reaction to any of those particular things? And then what is your protein to carbohydrate ratio? That is the next piece to take a look at, aiming for that 1.8 to 2 ratio of protein to carbohydrates to, again, push blood sugar down and keep it humming throughout the day. All right, the last thing I think that we probably need to look at is the additives and the fillers. Like, what else is in here and what is it doing? And so this particular product doesn't have a lot of additives and fillers in it, which is great. Neither does this one. There aren't too many more ingredients after kind of the basics of what they put in. But a product like this has erythritol in it, which can be very irritating and cause a lot of bloating and gas. So paying attention to what sweetener is used is maybe the next place we need to go. Is it going to be something like monk fruit or stevia or erythritol that you are going to choose as your sweetener, because any of these sweeteners can cause sort of a food intolerance type situation where you get bloating, gas, you just feel uncomfortable. So that's another piece to look at. All right, let's add just one more thing to look at with these protein powders, and that's the amount of fiber, right? I think the biggest mistake that I see over and over again, and this is one that I've made personally, is simply not getting enough dietary fiber. So if we're thinking about this protein smoothie as sort of our super fuel, is probably what I would call it, really helping us to power through a day, helping us with hormones and gut health and so much more, then we want to make sure we're getting some fiber too. But here's the biggest pain is like, oh, I forgot to take my fiber, I forgot to take this, right? That's so hard to remember. So if these powders could provide you with about 5 or 6 grams of fiber when we're trying to get at least 20 to 25 in a given day, I think that's a bonus, that's a plus with a lot of these different protein powders. So looking at these labels, for example, this one had 2, this one had about 4, this one had, how many did these have? This one had about 6. So that's another factor to look at when you're looking and trying to evaluate protein powders. Now, I'm not meaning to hate on the whey protein, but again, I've just seen so many food reactions in practice. But if you can tolerate a whey protein, again, the serving size here says 1 scoop, 25 grams of protein, and only 3 grams of carbohydrates. This is why your bodybuilders like this. It's a lot of fast protein for good muscle recovery and building muscle. All right, so hopefully that clarifies for you how to pick the right protein powder, looking at all the different factors that go into a protein powder and paying attention really at the end of the day to how your body responds. If you're in a hormone shift, if you have PCOS, you want the higher protein, lower carb, higher fiber powders. If you have a lot of food sensitivities and gut issues, then you want to focus on what the additives and fillers are, because that's a bigger issue for you and not being able to tolerate that. And if you have trouble with protein digestion and protein breakdown, then maybe a more even protein to carbohydrate ratio. And if you're muscle building and trying to really put a ton of muscle on, you can do whey as long as it doesn't bother your gut. Okay, I post new videos every week. Don't forget to like and subscribe.